Alright, so I'm doing a series called Retool or Rebuild where I check out teams around the league, more in the middling of the league, and see if they should retool to maybe go up into the top 10 teams in the league, or they should rebuild and start from the draft again. And the first team I think I should do is the Portland Trail Blazers, for the biggest reason that it's the biggest story right now with Lillard and whether they should trade the third pick or not. So I'm going to quickly go with a few takeaways and see if they should actually retool and get a contender, or they should rebuild and just start a new era. The first question always starts with Lillard, and right now is how long is his window going to last for as being a top player, as well as if they even do get the pieces, how long are they going to contend for? For the Blazers, like it or not, their championship window is closing very soon, as the only way they could get a championship team is if Lillard is the second best player, making them having to give up a lot of valuable resources to get a superstar player like that, most likely a top 15 player, which would be giving up more than they should. Even if they do get a player of that caliber, which is very unlikely, I don't see them being very good because they lose all their depth. They're a top heavy team, as well as they don't really get too much players in free agency to begin with, so I think that ends up being a really bad move for them. But let's kind of stay into that scenario for a second, where they do get someone like Jaylen Brown or Pascal Siakam or any other superstar that's maybe around top 15, outside of top 15, at least been an all-star in the past 3 years. I don't see them doing that much in that short amount of time that Damian Lillard has. Let's just say 3 years down the road and you finally build that contender, because I don't expect that type of team to be championship contenders in the first year. I expect them to be more playoff contenders. But let's just say they do it, they get their star player and they got Damian Lillard paired up with him. I don't see them really getting into a championship contending team until 3 years down the line, where Lillard is 35, 36, and maybe is going on the downhill rather than him staying in his prime. So you're giving up a lot for a short amount of time of Damian Lillard's true prime. Now you'd be stuck with Damian Lillard on a really big contract, because you know he's going to stay a near max player, if not max, and then you still have the other star player with their near max, and it doesn't seem like you can really get out of the situation cleanly. You're going to have to just go to a straight rebuild. And even with the star that you picked up, they're probably going to be an older player. So let's just say in those few years they end up being 30, 31, 32, and then you're back into the same situation as you had with Lillard, except maybe he's not even as good as Lillard at that point. So now you're dealing with a disgruntled star that's probably going to leave with Lillard around the same time, just because that window is closed and now it's time for you to do your full rebuild. But with the Trailblazers, I think their toughest task, even if they do get that star talent, is the Western Conference itself, because there's still 10 or 11 teams that were fighting all year for that playoff spot, which is why the Trailblazers didn't even end up getting into the playoffs, even though they did try and make it. Even though injuries and other stuff was in there, I can't really give that excuse too much, because other teams was injured and some teams still made runs at it. And Denver just barely pulled away, but from 3 to 6, I'd say 3 to 7 for a good amount of the season, it was pretty much anybody's game to get. And even at the ending there, with the Pelicans moving up to 9th, especially from them being the second seed with a full roster, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Trailblazers to really make grounds in this conference, at least for the next year or two. The second biggest question involves Shaedon Sharpe and Anthony Simons, as their names are making headlines through trade rumors as Damian Lillard sent a request to the Trailblazers. Will the value of said star player be worth giving up Simons, Sharpe, or both with the third pick by the end of Damian Lillard's window? The package will most likely include that third pick, but one of them has to go if that's the case for Damian Lillard to get a contending team with him next year. And there's a lot of things to unwrap with that, especially with what they've been doing. At least Simons for the past 2 years, and Shaedon Sharpe at the end of this year. I'd say the first thing is the way they actually progressed. Simons, I could say as well, he progressed really well. But near the end of that year, Shaedon Sharpe progressed really well. and you could see them really improving. And it's hard to say where their potential's at. For one, as a player, individual players, but as a team as well. How can they be as a duo in the future? What do the Trailblazers hold as their potential, and do they really think they could reach it? To continue on scenarios for 1 second with this question and put it into a scenario of where Simons and Sharp are on their best game, hitting their potential, where do you see them going? Because I see them as really good playoff contenders that can contend with the teams of the future, which would be a Grizzlies or a Pelicans, whether Pelicans even continue, whether on where Zion goes, as well as even OKC and the Spurs once they get Victor. I see them in that little time, if they could get the right pieces with the third pick and even trade Lillard, is it possible for them to do something even better than what Lillard and McCollum did in the past? Well, I will say in general that is very far-fetched, knowing what Lillard became and what expecting of Simons and Sharp to do, but this was the point of picking up these players. This is the point of drafting these players, is to get their potential off. And right now, from the minutes that you've been giving them, they've been doing nothing but striding and actually playing really good. So where can this go? And if you have these few players and you have a good starting point, where can you go after that with the third pick, as well as surrounding these guys with better role players and better players to really support their strengths as well as help their weaknesses? So the third big question for this is the coaching staff and how they've done since, I think, their big move of Terry Stotts leaving with Chauncey Billups, and whether that foundation and that coaching staff can really change this culture that they have already. Because as you could see from with Terry Stotts, that culture did not work. It didn't work with the start of Lillard's career with Aldridge and them, and once Aldridge left and they kind of became a new little team with CJ McCollum, Nurkic, Al-Farouq Aminu and them, I think they did the best they could, but it still just wasn't good enough, especially within the time of where they were playing with the Warriors. Now, I think Chauncey Billups has a lot of good things going for him, and I think he's going to change a lot of minds as he goes into his second season to coaching. Let's say they go into the next season with a whole turnover of new players and a whole different roster for Lillard to actually contend with, whether it's the playoffs or the championships. I really think it'll just most likely be the playoffs in the first season, but if they do get that type of roster, how is Billups going to handle that high tier of a team in his second year of coaching, as well as how is he going to coach them differently from Stotts to make them an even better team? As he tried to get his point across to play hard and be that old hard-nosed team that he used to play for with the Pistons, especially when Lillard was out of the lineup, I see him do a little bit more of that, being more of a leader in that sense of getting them to do those type of things. But with Lillard in the lineup, I don't know how much that would bring when you see the type of shots Lillard takes and the type of game that he plays. Is going to be harder for a younger team to get on board with that compared to a more experienced team that they're trying to bring in for Lillard. This is where the front office can really help Billups and bring in more players that are suited to his type of coaching and to more help the team on other ends of the court where Lillard doesn't really do as much, like whether it's defense or just on-ball pressure and just getting teams involved during offensive sets and stuff like that, where Lillard, I get he's a great player, but he still has deficiencies in other realms, and the more you help on his weaknesses to make the team more complete, the better it is for Billups and the easier it is for him to get his voice across to everyone and everyone to actually be able to listen. But with a quick reiteration of the first three takeaways, and my true answers to those takeaways is, First, how far is Lillard's window going to be? I don't think it's going to be that long. I think it's going to be 2 or 3 years before you really see a decline, and where you would have to bring in an actual top 15 player again for Lillard to get the proper help he needs. But with that, I think it's too much of a gamble to even consider another player coming in and them getting a whole turnover of new players to get a new roster for him to then compete for the next 2 or 3 years. I don't see that very likely ending up in a championship for the Trailblazers. So with my second question involves Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe, and whether their value, whether it's one of them or both of them, with the third pick is going to be the same value as the star coming in to be on the Blazers. With the few stars that are set to maybe get traded in the offseason, I don't think the Blazers will have enough to be able to give up enough value for that player. They would have to give up a lot more than they would want to for that star, but I still don't think even that team would accept it, because a lot of those teams that are losing that star isn't going into a rebuilding state. They would rather go into a retooling state where they would want equal value, and I don't think Simons has equal value as these stars in the league with a third overall pick. Even with all three added to the deal, I feel like if it was all three of them, the pick, Sharpe, and Simons, that would have to be somebody, a star on a team that's going away to go to a rebuild state, and I don't see any teams like that. But even with the trade not working out, I also think that Sharpe and Simons' value will be a lot higher by the end of those 2 to 3 years of that contention window for Lillard, as I still see a lot of potential in Sharpe as he played the end of his year out and he looked really good scoring wise. He can get to the basket as well. He's shown himself in general as a really good 3-level scorer, and with Simons already being that 3-level scorer that we've seen, I think that could be a really good duo and a very easy choice for them to build around, as now you just need to get the proper front court and maybe one bench player to have a 3-guard lineup for them to be fine. And with Chauncey Billups, I think it's a good idea to keep him, whether it's retooling or rebuilding. For retooling, I think Lillard plus a bunch of veterans and another star, I think would be fine with Billups' coaching, knowing that he's a player coach and he still runs kind of more of a free-flowing offense, and with the help of assistant coach Scott Brooks, it'll be a little bit easier since he also dealt with other stars like Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Russell Westbrook. And if it's a rebuild stage, again, Chauncey Billups, I think, would be good, knowing the game that he knows as a point guard in the league before with the Pistons and the Nuggets, and even playing with other stars, he'll know how a star is supposed to be treated. So when Simons or Sharpe, their potential comes into as a star, I think Chauncey Billups will rise to the occasion and actually be good enough to coach any one of them. So I think the Trailblazers should end up rebuilding with Simons and Sharpe, because I don't think it would be a great idea to end up retooling with Damian Lillard, especially knowing his age and how much time he has left. I don't think he has a lot of time to be the top player, and I don't think they're going to get another top 15 player that could elevate everybody enough for them to make a championship run in the next 2 or 3 years. So what do you think? Do you think they should ride with Damian Lillard and get a team that they can retool with and just make a championship run for the next 2 years? Or do you think they should rebuild with Simons and Sharpe and go within their timeline? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.